Lyenda Delp with our stewardship moment.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am going to go out on a limb that there are some of you, like me, who have had about enough. Enough of what, you might wonder? Well, enough of a lot of things. First among those may be Zoom calls, whose ubiquity may be the standout novel feature that will forever be associated with the novel coronavirus. Beyond our Sunday calls, I've had school-related Zoom calls, Zoom happy hours, and for work, there are Zoom calls to conduct business, the internal prep calls to prepare for the business calls on Zoom, and the post-meeting Zoom calls to evaluate how the last Zoom call went. I've attended 2 Zoom weddings, and there was a recent Zoom funeral for a family friend. But it's not just Zoom that's in my crosshairs. I've had enough of having my movements restricted, canceling plans to travel out of state, missing loved ones who live far away. I've had enough of worrying about our health and safety, wondering if a mundane act such as going to the grocery store or the hair salon or dentist will invite dastardly germs to follow me home. I've had enough of counting cases and deaths. 209,000 and counting seems an improbable number for what we are counting. 7 million is much larger than the country that I come from. I've had enough of worrying about my children and wondering about the society in which we are raising them, and whether I'm doing enough to teach them how they will each need to develop into resolute, resilient adults with unquestionable sense of self and confidence that as a child of God, each is fully entitled to own and enjoy all the blessings given by the Almighty. I've had enough of shaking my head thinking about the number of people and children around this country, in our state, in our county, perhaps just a few miles away, who are food insecure and becoming more so each day. I've had enough of worrying about friends or loved ones who seem to be hanging on by a thread. I've had enough of having to call out privileges of varying sort and having to stay vigilant so that those who have it don't abuse it or me. I've had enough of racial injustice and the now familiar pang of too frequent incidences, the avoidable loss of life, and the fierce language of confrontation and strife, and justice unserved, which of course Bishop has discussed so well. I've had enough of having to even explain why Black Lives Matter, why we should do all in our power to right injustice and inequity for all people. Some days, I briefly wonder if I am enough. I wonder if I have enough in my tank to be enough for others, to be strong enough, to be resilient. And so maybe some of you can relate to this pandemic experience of questioning what was previously unquestionable. In some ways, this pandemic has been the great equalizer, proving that science is greater than fiction and that there are things that just are and won't change because we wish it or tell others it's different. To be factual, some have had it far worse than others, and so it's not quite equal at all. And even as I share my private lamentations with all of you, I do so because if there's any place that has given me some hope, it's been you, this community at St. James. So my family has been coming here for 20 years. My husband and I first started as a newly married biracial couple, new to town and wanting to worship in a place we both enjoyed. Over the years, our family grew, and we've seen a lot and partaken in a lot. Too many special experiences to recall today in one single stewardship moment. But as COVID-19 has forced us all to contemplate life a bit differently, when I think I really truly have had enough, and I'm going to skip Zoom church because there's just been enough, I really called out the St. James community has been for long my bedrock, my solace, and indeed my cornerstone, particularly in times of crisis and anguish. And isn't this the crisis to top them all? I will further confess to all of you, and here in front of the bishop, that I, one who considers herself pretty tough, a lifelong churchgoer, I've had some of my darkest moments of my adult life during these months-long pandemic and social strife. The worry, anguish, and concern just simply felt too much sometimes. There were multiple Sunday mornings I would say, my eyes are tired, my head hurts, I am not sitting in front of another Zoom, not even for Zoom church. I just have had enough. Plus, there is no communion, there is no fellowship, there's no coffee hour. What's the point? I am just not feeling it today, and I would try to stay away. Maybe it happened to one or two of you. You don't have to say out loud. But inevitably, I would think about something at St. James, perhaps the last Sunday at Zoom church. The smiling faces, the readings, the way Reverend Melissa or Reverend Audrey extricate a contemporary message from whatever the scripture, and the way my inner being would react to hearing that, even if I'd heard it over and over many times before. And then I would sidle up to a chair in our dining room. You just heard the clock, unfortunately, where Phil and my dad would have already been tuned in, and I'd feel the familiar feeling, like a warm, eternal flame emanating from the leaders of our service. This familiar calling from God, as if speaking directly to what I need, and I would be grateful to be there again. Because the St. James community is a remarkable place. And sure, we have an incredible historic and beautiful physical space in Upper Montclair, but the wonder and the true power of this community comes from the people who comprise it, and especially our leadership in the clergy and the lay leadership who set the tone. And I believe we have been truly blessed to have inspiring, empathetic, God-fearing, and yet worldly leaders at St. James. And yes, I did say God-fearing and worldly in the same sentence, and I meant it. Because this is the perfect paradox that makes St. James so relevant to me, and I would venture to all of us in this time. And that compels me to come back to Zoom church every Sunday. Our leadership shows us how to live in the everyday, extremely challenging world. In this world of October 2020, she takes God's teachings and helps us to understand what it means and how we are called for the great challenges of our present times. Together, they show us how to love and support each other despite all of our differences, and to amplify our common goals for strength and betterment of so many. So that even in those days, when I think to myself, truly, I have had enough, no Zoom church for me this Sunday, my inner voice reminds me, no, my girl, St. James is what's enough. It's exactly enough of what you need today. Thank you.
Lyenda, you take my breath away with the beauty of your message. Here's what I always say, a preacher's in the house. And thank you